Hello, everybody. We are on chapter 7 of The City of Ember, A Message Full of Holes. It was the printing that sparked Lena's curiosity. It was not handwriting, or if it was the neatest, most regular handwriting she had ever seen. It was more like the letters printed on cans of food or along the sides of pencils. Something other than a hand had written those words, a machine of some kind. This was the writing of the builders, and so this piece of paper must have come from the builders too. Lena gathered up the scraps of paper from the floor and gently pried open Poppy's fists and mouth to extract the crumpled wads. She put all of this into the dented box and carried it to her room. That evening, Granny and the baby were both asleep by a little after 8. Lena had nearly an hour to examine her discovery. She took the scraps from the box and spread them out on the table in her bedroom. The paper was thick. At each torn edge was a fringe of tangled fibers. There were many little pieces, and one big piece with so many holes it was like lace. The chewed bits were beyond saving. They were almost a paste, but Lena spread out the big lacy piece and saw that on one edge of it, which was still intact, was a column of numbers. She collected all of the dry scraps and puzzled over them for a long time, trying to figure out where they fit into the larger piece. When she had arranged them as well as she could, this was what she had. Instruct egress the off dock in strict secure period of years. Prepare made for in hot city as fall. 1. Ex riv ip orc. 2. Stin marked by E by R. Dj. 3. Eddy down inverb nk to edge at 8 low. 4. Axe to the wat, fine door of book, key behind, small steel, pan the right, rem, e, open do. 5. Oak stocked with neck up, in back on eat. 6. Use opes low, stir, head down, use a, and assist over rep. 7. Approx 3 hours. Disem follow pat. Lena could make sense of only a few words here and there. Even so, something about this tattered document was exciting. It was nothing like anything. It was not like anything Lena had ever seen. She stared at the very first word at the top of the page. Instruct, and she suddenly knew what it must be. She'd seen it often enough at school. It had to be the beginning of instructions. Her heart began knocking at her chest like a fist at a door. She had found something. She had found something strange and important. Instructions for something, but what? And how terrible that Poppy had found it first and ruined it. It occurred to Lena that this might be what her grandmother had been talking about for so long. Perhaps this was the thing that was lost. But of course, not knowing what had been lost, Granny wouldn't have recognized the box when she saw it. She would have tossed it out the closet just as carelessly as she tossed out everything else. Anyhow, it didn't matter whether this was the thing or not the thing. It was a mystery in itself, whatever it was, and Lena was determined to solve it. The first step was to stick the scraps of paper down. They were so light that a breath could scatter them. She had a little bit of glue left in an old bottle. Painstakingly, she put a dot of glue on each of the scraps and pressed each one into its place on the precious few remaining whole sheets of paper. She put another piece of paper on top of this and set the box on it to flatten everything down. Just as she finished, the lights went out. She had forgotten to keep an eye on the clock at her windowsill. She had to undress and get into bed in the dark. She was too excited to sleep much that night. Her mind whirled about, trying to think what the message she found might be. She felt sure it had something to do with saving the city. What if those instructions were for fixing the electricity or for making a movable light? That would change everything. When the lights went on in the morning, she had a few minutes before Poppy wakened to work at the puzzle. But there were so many missing words. How could she ever make sense of such a jumble? As she pulled on her red jacket and tied the frayed and knotted laces of her shoes, she thought about it. If the paper was important, she shouldn't keep it to herself. But who could she tell? Maybe the messenger captain. She would know about things like official documents. Captain Fleary, Lena said when she got to work, would you have time to come home with me later on today, just for a minute? I found something I'd like to show you. Found what? Said Captain Fleary. Some paper with writing on it. I think it might be important. Captain Fleary raised her skinny eyebrows. What do you mean important? Well, I'm not sure. Maybe it isn't, but if you could look at it anyway. So that evening, Captain Fleary came home with Lena and peered at the bits of paper. She bent down and inspected the writing. Foal, she said. Axe, ram, aunt. What kind of words are those? I don't know, said Lena. The words are all broken up because Poppy chewed on them. I see, said Captain Fleary. She poked at the paper. This looks like instructions for something, she said. A recipe, I suppose. Small steel pan, that would be what you used to cook with. But who would have such a perfect writing instrument? That's the way they wrote in the old days, said Captain Fleary. It would be a very old recipe. But then why would it have been kept in this beautiful box? She showed the box to Captain Fleary. I think it was locked up in here for some reason, and you wouldn't lock up something unless it was important. But Captain Fleary didn't seem to have heard her, or she said it could be a school exercise, somebody's homework that never got turned in. But have you ever seen paper like this? Doesn't it look as if it's come from someplace else? Not here. Captain Fleary straightened up. A look of puzzlement came over her face. There is nowhere but here, she said. She put both her hands on Lena's shoulders. You, my dear, are letting your imagination run away with you. Are you overtired, Lena? Are you anxious? I could put you on short days for a while. Oh, no, no, Lena said. I'm fine, I am. I just don't know what to do about. She gestured toward the paper. Never mind, said Captain Fleary. Don't think about it. Throw it away. You're worrying too much. I know, we are all. There's just so much to worry about, but we mustn't let it unsettle us. She gave Lena a long look. Her eyes were the color of dishwater. Help is coming, she said. Help? Yes, coming to save us. Who is? Captain Fleary bent down and lowered her voice, as if telling her a secret. Who built our city, dear? The builders, said Lena. That's right, and the builders will come again and show us the way. They will? Very soon, said Captain Fleary. How do you know? Captain Fleary straightened up again and clapped a hand over her heart. I know it here, she said, and I have seen it in a dream. So have all of us, all of the believers. So that's what they believe, Lena thought. And Captain Fleary is one of them. She wondered how the captain could feel so sure about it just because she'd seen it in a dream. Maybe it was the same for her as the sparkling city was for Lena. She wanted it to be true. The captain's face lit up. I know that what you must do, dear. Come to one of our meetings. It would lift your heart. We sing. Oh, said Lena, thank you. But I'm not sure maybe sometime. She tried to be polite, but she knew she wouldn't go. She didn't want to stand around waiting for the builders. She had other things to do. Captain Fleary patted her arm. No pressure, dear, she said. If you change your mind, let me know. But take my advice. Forget about your little puzzle project. Lie down and take a nap. It clears the mind. Her narrow face beamed with kindness down at Lena. You take tomorrow off, she said. She raised a hand goodbye and she went down the stairs. Lena took advantage of her day off to go to the supply depot to see Lizzie Biscoe. Lizzie was quick and smart. She might have some good ideas. At the supply depot, crowds of shopkeepers stood in long, disorderly line that stretched out the door. They pushed and they jostled and they snapped impatiently at each other. Lena joined them, but they seemed so frantic that they frightened her a little. They must be very sure now that the supplies were running out, she thought, or they're determined to get what they can before it's too late. When she got close to the head of the line, she heard the same conversation several times. Sorry, the clerk would say when the shopkeeper asked for 10 packets of sewing needles or a dozen drinking glasses or 20 packets of light bulbs. There's a severe shortage of that item. You can have only one. Or else the clerk would say, sorry, we're out of that entirely. Forever, forever. Lena knew that it hadn't always been this way. When Ember was a young city, the storerooms were full. They held everything the citizens could want. So much. It seemed that the supplies would never run out. Lena's grandmother had told her that the school children were given a tour of the storerooms as part of their education. They took an elevator from the street level to a long curved tunnel with doors on both sides and other tunnels branching off of it. The guide led the tour down the long passages, opening one door after another. This area, he would say, is canned goods. Now we come to school supplies, and around this bend we have kitchenware. Next come carpentry tools. And at each door the children crowded against each other to see. Every room had something different, Granny told Lena. Boxes of toothpaste in one room, bottles of cooking oil, bars of soap, bars of pills, bottles of pills. There were 20 rooms just for vitamin pills. One room was stacked with hundreds of cans of fruit. There was something called pineapple. I remember that one especially. What was a pineapple? Asked Lena. It was yellow and sweet, said Granny with a dreamy look in her eyes. I had it 4 times before we ran out of it. But these tours had been discontinued long before Lena was born. The storerooms, people said, were no longer a pleasure to look at. Their dusty shelves stood mostly empty now. It was rumored that in some rooms nothing was left at all. A child, seeing the rooms where powdered milk should have been stored, or the rooms that stored bandages or socks or pins or notebooks, or most of all, the dozens of rooms that had once held thousands of light bulbs, would not feel, as earlier generations of children had, that Ember was endlessly rich. Today's children, if they were allowed to tour the storerooms, would feel afraid. Thinking about all this, Lena waited in the line of people at Lizzie's station. When she got to the front, she leaned forward with her elbows on the countertop and whispered, Lizzie, can you meet me after you're through with work? I'll wait for you right outside the door. Lizzie nodded eagerly. At 4 o'clock, Lizzie came trotting out of the office door, and Lena said to her, will you come home with me for a minute? I want to show you something. Sure, said Lizzie. And as they walked, Lizzie talked. My wrist is killing me from writing all day, she said. You have to write in the tiniest letters to save paper, so I get a terrible cramp in my wrist and my fingers, and the people are so rude. Today they were worse than ever. I said to some guy, you can't have 15 cases of corn. You can only have 3. And he said, look, don't tell me that. I saw plenty of cans in the Pot Street Market just yesterday. And I said, well, that's why there aren't so many left today. And he said, don't you be smart with me, Carrot Head. But what am I supposed to do? I can't make cans of corn out of thin air. They passed through Harkin Square, around the gathering hall, and down Roving Street, where 3 of the floodlights were out, making a cave of shadows. Lizzie, said Lena, interrupting the flow of talk, is it true about the light bulbs? Is what true? That there aren't any left? Lizzie shrugged. I don't know. They hardly ever let us go downstairs into the storerooms. All we see are the reports the carriers turn in. How many forks in room 1146? How many doorknobs in room 3291? How many children's shoes in 2249? But when you see the report for light bulb room, what does it say? Oh, I never get to see that one, said Lizzie. That one and a few other ones, like the vitamin report, only a few people can see. Who? Well, the mayor, of course, and old Flabface. Lena looked at her questioningly. You know, Farlow Batten, the head of the storerooms. He is so mean, Lena, you would just hate him. He counts us late if we come in even 2 minutes after 8. And he looks over our shoulders as we're writing, which is awful because he has bad breath. And he runs his fingers over what we've written and said, this word is illegible. This word is illegible. Those numbers are illegible. It's his favorite word, illegible. When they came to Lena Street, Lena ducked her head in the door of the yarn shop and said hello to Granny, and then they climbed the stairs to the apartment. Lizzie was talking about how hard it was to stand up all day, how it made her knees ache, and how her shoes pinched her feet. She stopped talking long enough to say hello to Eveline Murdo, who was sitting by the window with Poppy on her lap, and then she began again as Lena led her down back into the bedroom. Lena, where were you when the big blackout came? She asked. But she went right on without waiting for an answer. I was at home, luckily, but it was scary, wasn't it? Lena nodded. She didn't want to talk about what had happened that day. All right, we're going to pause there and we're going to restart our video and finish chapter 7.